Award-winning children's book author Avi Wartis, pen-named as Avi, has had a successful career as a writer with more than 80 published works, despite it being his worst subject in school.
I was not a very good student. I just accepted that. But teachers would call on me. I couldn't supply an answer. And they would say, well, let's go to your smart sister. And she would do fine. But that psychologically was not a very good thing for me. On Fridays, there were spelling tests. And I always did very badly at them. And every Friday I would announce that I was too sick to go to school. But my father, who was a doctor, would look down my throat and say, you're fine. And off I would go to fail another spelling test.
Although Avi was an avid reader, he continued to struggle with writing throughout high school until one teacher changed his focus.
At the end of my second year, the English teacher called my parents and said that I was the worst student he had ever had. And that unless I had tutoring and learned to type, my handwriting was very bad. They were not going to let me back in the school. And that summer I spent with a teacher friend of my parents. And she looked at my writing and she said something that nobody had ever said to me before. She said, you're an interesting person. If you wrote better, people would know that. That changed my life.
Avi decided to pursue a career in writing and found it odd when his parents discouraged him from this path.
But somewhere in that year, in 1955, I wrote down, it was March of that year, it said, I've decided I'm going to be a writer. And that's me announcing to myself that I'm going to be a writer. And from that point on, writing was the focus of my interest. But my folks actively discouraged me from becoming a writer. They wouldn't tell me why, but they said, oh, you can do this, you can do that, but don't become a writer.
What Avi didn't know at the time is that he had dysgraphia, a neurological disorder affecting written expression and difficulty converting the sounds into written form. However, despite his parents' discouragement, he went on to college to become a playwright.
If there's one characteristic of me as a person, stubbornness. So I go off to college and I wind up at the University of Wisconsin. And I'm majoring in theater and history. And I'm writing, or trying to write plays. There's a playwriting contest for students, and I enter it, and I do not win it, but I get notes from the judges, unbeknownst to the judge, because my name wasn't on my submission. Was somebody who taught a playwriting class, and he wrote, this is not a very good play, but clearly the writer is somebody who is not a native English speaker and is trying to learn the English language, and he should be encouraged to continue his studies. Okay, that tells you something about my writing.
Wow.
But the next year I win that contest. And the play is produced, and more to the point, it's published in the school literary magazine. And that's my first publication.
When Avi became a father, he would make up stories to tell his kids, which led to him becoming a children's author. He was traveling the country reading his books at schools when one teacher made an astonishing assessment that would finally give Avi the answers he'd been searching for.
But one time, as I did that, a reading teacher who saw these slides, that's what I was showing, came up to me and said, did you know that you're dysgraphic? And I had never even heard the term before. And I said, what do you mean? And she explained what it was. I went back, I was in my mid-40s at this time. And that was a revelation to me. I went back to my parents. My mother had died by then. But I said to my father, "Did you know that I had dysgraphia?" And he said, "Yeah, we had you tested." And that was the thing they had found so many years ago.
Avi continues to be an inspiration to people who have learning differences and hopes his story can motivate people to pursue their passions even if they're told they can't do it.
When you have these kinds of frustrations, you get very angry at yourself. You think of yourself as stupid. You can't believe you wrote something so inept. You can't stand the comments, etc., etc. So you wind up being frustrated and angry at yourself. And what I have received once I learned this was simply the way my brain worked, is not to be angry at myself. People with these kinds of problems develop compensatory skills. I love to read my books to kids with these problems because they're wonderful listeners.
Yeah.
And they're very sharp. They are, in fact, I find, intelligent in ways that kids who don't have these problems often are. They're very perceptive. For younger people, I think it's often the parents who need to be educated, right?
Yep.
And certainly schools and teachers. So the main advice I give is don't be angry at yourself. Don't beat yourself up. Go with it and find ways around it. And you can, the way I did. And learn to do what you want to do in your own fashion.
For A World of Difference, I'm Cindy Peterson.